Thank you so much for spending the next 40 minutes with me. It's a real pleasure to be here. It's a true honor. I'm excited to talk about these things, but nervous at the same time. I see a lot of people that I've known for many years in the room, and so I want to make sure that I'm on my best game, but here it goes. A little bit more about me, if Dana didn't say enough. I've been a faculty member for quite a long time, about the last 18 years. In the University of Regina in Saskatchewan. So I'm a Canadian, so there's a few of you out there I know. Yeah, good. There's one of the things I'm most proud of, I think, is I spent a lot of time working with my students who are mostly undergraduate and graduate students. And I think what they do on the web actually improves the world. By creating videos, by developing things, whether it's instructional videos or whatever it might be, we talk a lot about how we can actually improve the world by being online. And so that is really my fundamental way of looking at the world, that I think the web is a good thing. I have 4 children that I'm very proud of. They teach me so much more than anyone has ever taught me in terms of understanding the web. And they'll come in once in a while, but really, when we think about the web and the future, it's not our future, it's our kids' future, and thinking about how the health of the web is such an important piece. Right now, it's not very healthy at all, and I'm going to talk a bit about that at the beginning and hopefully inspire you to change and make things better, because things aren't that bad, we just have to look in the right places. So if you remember back in 1993, the dawn of the World Wide Web, that was actually the first year I was teaching. I was a high school teacher in Duck Lake, Saskatchewan, population like 2,000, maybe 1,000. I'm being generous at this point. I had the chore of going on top of the school, and I was the first one. I basically put a satellite dish, a direct PC dish on the school, and finally had that first connection. Heard that first time of the modem, and we were connected for the first time. And then we were like, what do we do now? Luckily, that year, 1993, was when Mosaic was created. I watched TV, October of that year. Peter Mansbridge, who's a Canadian newscaster, said this is the beginning of the internet, and this is his really
Well, there's
clumsy
a revolution going on in
announcement.
rec rooms, offices, and classrooms around the world. A revolution in which 15 million people are taking part. They're sharing scientific data, arguing philosophy, or passing on cooking tips and gossip night and day through a computer network called Internet. For about $200 a year, they log on to personal computers connected to phone lines and communicate across cultures and continents. Bill Cameron has this report on the growing phenomenon of Internet.
Right. So it really... He does get better over the years. He retired recently. But it was really interesting just to hear that, and actually the rest of the newscast is really worthwhile. Like the utopian vision they had for the internet, all these people could use anything. And race and color doesn't matter, and none of this will matter. Like it'll just be a very just place. And when we look back in retrospect, it's scary to think we were so utopian about it. Back then, I was on the World Wide Web virtual library. I spent time. It looks very much like Yahoo. This retired not too long ago. GeoCities was a thing. It's all archived, by the way. Lots of GIFs, lots of under construction signs, if you remember those. And you can still see some of that. Everything's been archived. Some of the old, if you want to check out Dave Matthews in 1995, you can go check out the band or whatever it is. WebQuests were the thing I did the most with my students. And some of you remember Bertie Dodge's work. Like that was about 1993 to 1995, in that range when WebQuests became a thing. That was what educators spent a lot of time developing web pages and doing WebQuests. 2005 came the social web, and in society we saw this utopian vision. This was a little later than 2005, but I remember this photo being circulated around, and everyone marveled at the technology. And it wasn't even smartphones then. It was like some guy's got his laptop there. I don't know if he's got, which is totally amazing to me. Everyone's got regular old cameras, and no smartphones. But this was sort of the beginning. Everyone's like, "Wow, look at the technology! Everything's changed." Ultimately, then we start the viral videos from 2005 on. We've got Charlie Bit My Finger. We got the history of dance, or whatever it was called. We've got Keyboard Cat, which was a really important point in the world. And of course, a young Justin Bieber. His mother decided to upload a video, and he was discovered on the web. And it was one of those narratives that you see, like anyone can be discovered, anyone can be heard. It's everyone's voice that matters. Again, really big. Now, one of my favorite videos was the Numa Numa from back in the day. Michael Wesch, who actually did some really early research, he's a digital ethnographer, did some really interesting stuff on why this was a pivotal moment in the web.
There's this great moment. Gary Wolk has written about this. He says, Brolsma's video single-handedly justifies the existence of webcams. And he goes on to say, because here he is sitting in this dismal-looking suburban bedroom, but he's really going for it, flirting with the camera, utterly given over to the music. It's a movie of someone who's having the time of his life, wants to share his joy with everyone, and doesn't care what anyone else thinks.
And the next part.
People all over the world joining in this dance. And this then becomes sort of something really important that's going on. And again, Gary Wolk has this great line when he's talking about this. He says, they start to look less like an infectious joke than a new cultural order. These kids aren't mocking the Numa Numa guy, they're venerating him. And they're beautiful to see because they're replicating and spreading his happiness. They're following a ritual that's meaningful if not yet venerable, learning the dance, lip-singing the song, documenting their performance just so, making it available for the world to see. So I kind of like to think of Gary as the first guy on the dance floor of this global mixer. And there's a lot more going on than just dancing. And you think about the joy that people are expressing and the fun that they're having as they do this dance. And I like to think of it as more than just a dance, it's a celebration. It's a celebration of new forms of empowerment. Anybody with a webcam now has a stronger voice and presence. It's a celebration of new forms of community and types of community that we've never really seen before, global connections transcending space and time. It's a celebration of new and unimaginable possibility. And so, you can say that this is all hype, like these are just people dancing and having fun, but think about what they're dancing in front of. They're dancing in front of about 1 billion boxes in places all over the world that are networked together and allowing us to connect in ways we've never connected before. And in fact, they can actually invent new ways to connect with each other, and it's getting easier and easier to do so. And so that's why I like to think that this is really just a very important moment.
So I don't know if you ever looked at the Numa Numa with that such seriousness, right? When it actually becomes the beginning of a social movement. And in many ways, I think we bought it in a big way, that this was really going to be the thing. In education, every ed tech presentation would see something like this, like, look at all the tools. And everyone was like, oh, there's too many tools. We don't need this many tools. I was asking in a session earlier today, like, the last time when the App Store came out, everyone downloaded every app ever, and now I don't remember the last time I downloaded an app. It's just I use 3 basically, except for the telephone one. I just can't get rid of that one. But even when MOOCs came out, Dana mentioned MOOCs. Stanford. There's just Sebastian Thrun who said, in the future, there's only going to be 10 universities. That's all there's going to be. And then I think that idea is sort of wiped away in some ways, but there's still people that do believe it, that just believe that teachers will be irrelevant down the road as well. This was seen a lot, this question. If you can Google it, why teach it? Haven't seen the curriculum reform happen since then, but you hear this a lot. Like, why do we just throw away? Why do we keep on asking those questions? I think it's an important question, but we're not doing much about it. Then come the other I'll let you take that question. Sorry. I'll tell the other techno-utopians. The OLFPC project, wonderful looking project, that 1 laptop per child, incredible. But when you start to go a bit deeper in terms of, and there was a lot of criticism when this came out, this idea that we should give laptops to everyone, it becomes very much the white savior mentality when you start to look at what the photographs, the discourse around it, and it's really kind of interesting. And it also puts incredible onus on the kids in terms of what they're expected to do and how the teacher's going to look back. Like, basically, there was narratives around, we gave these kids, these Android tablets, they hacked them, they basically solved the world problems, turned them into supercomputers or whatever it was. It was these really incredible things, and they were great stories that we passed around. But a lot of it was misinformation, as Langdon Winter says. The almost religious conviction that a widespread adoption of computers and communication systems, along with easy access to electronic information, would automatically produce a better world for human living. This is 1986. I mean, this is well before this sort of stuff, but it's that techno-utopian field that we say we have to be very cautious of. Now, I'm going to try to take you back there a little bit to show you what is good about it, but we have to think about this. So 2017, rest in peace, the internet. I mean, I'm going in about 12-year cycles here. 2017 was a bad year. Fake news was bigger than, certainly in 2016, 2017, you saw more fake news on Facebook than anything else. Mark Zuckerberg is really sorry for what he's done, so just want to make sure that you talk to him about that. So he apologized for the way Facebook has been used to divide people. This interesting one from the Globe and Mail the other day. Your smartphone is making you stupid, antisocial, unhealthy, so why can't you put it down? Talks about it's common knowledge that the industry, this is really interesting and unveiling, they've sort of recently alleged this, that Instagram, think of the teenage girl that uses Instagram. She posts something, a photo that she's proud of, and then she waits for the likes to come. Apparently Instagram withholds the likes so that she gets anxious and comes back later to check. Isn't that kind of something? So if this is true, this sort of, the way that they mess with our dopamine is incredible. So this sort of stuff scares me. Former VP of Facebook has also apologized. We have created tools that are ripping apart the social fabric of how society works. The short-term dopamine-driven feedback loops that we have created are destroying how society works. No civil discourse, no cooperation, just misinformation and mistruth. Scary stuff. Why are we at a tech conference, right? We should go, I'm not helping here at all. We saw the alt-right, take a hold of the internet in many big ways. Logan Paul, if you saw him, if you followed it, or if you talked to your kids who Logan Paul, famous YouTuber, apologized for the victim of a suicide victim in Japan. We saw people start talking to Alexa and Google Home. I thought this was the most depressing article when I read it. 41% of folks who have such a system say that using it feels like talking to a friend or at least another person. I feel that 59% of us should hug those people right now, right? The FCC killed net neutrality. I hope there's actually a repeal on this, but it'll be interesting. It's sad. I've been dealing with catfishing issues. If you've been in one of my sessions, people have been using my photos for the last 11 years to basically scam women into thinking they're dating me, and then eventually they'll send me money, but not me money, the scammers money. But luckily, there's been this breakthrough last week. With an ingestible pill, you can track fart development in real time on your phone, right? So I think we're okay, because none of us could tell a fart was coming before, right? Like, who thought of this? Anyway. Right. But there's still hope, right? I actually, prepping for the keynote, I crowdsource just about everything when I'm doing this. Prepping for a keynote, titled this, and I got tons of stuff. If you look for this tweet, if you look for me on Facebook, if you want to check me out there, there's tons of stuff. People are still happy about the web. They see wonderful things every day. We maybe don't talk about these things, but we must talk about these things. It was really great to see that list. So I'll talk about a few things that I think do still matter. Number one, openness still matters. I started my career, or my academic career, researching open networks, open source networks, and really looking at how we can look at the methodologies of open source and how we can move those into teacher networks. And a lot of that's been enabled through the personal learning networks, personal learning environments, and so on. I think copyleft matters out of this. This idea that, and if you haven't watched this video, it's worthwhile. It's a documentary about a musician. It's called RIP, a Remixed Manifesto. It's a few years old now, but it really shows you the complexities of dealing with copyright. Another one that I would certainly suggest, it's older now. It's not wrong to go back to old TED Talks here and there. Laws that control creativity. Larry Lessig from Stanford talks great about, in really, really thoughtful ways in terms of the future of copyright and why we must be copyleft. People are using the Creative Commons to a greater extent than ever before, but we need to tell more people about this. People are also giving up their work in a copyleft way. There are tons of resources. The OER Commons, for instance, OpenStax, which used to be Connections. And of course, I'll share these slides with everyone afterwards. In my country, in Canada, we have, in British Columbia, and there's a number of other provincial initiatives where we're government's funding open textbook projects. So to reduce costs to students, they're developing textbooks. Professors are spending their time. They're getting paid to do this, but at least it's not having to buy the professor's textbook or that particular practice. Participation matters in a big way, and I've been a really big fan of people like Zay Frank. Zay Frank was the person that I really learned how to engage people on the internet. One of the reasons I originally did MOOCs and other examples of trying to engage and get people to do things online. He does some really interesting projects back in the day. Back in 2006, he was the first vlogger. Every vlogger after that has been influenced by Zay Frank, if you don't know who that person is. He put out projects like this, like the Young Me, Now Me project, which I think was fantastic. Just getting people to show themselves in a different light, just to take a photo from themselves and then do it again at a later time. And there were some really interesting ones that came up. You know, a couple that actually met much later in life, brothers. You won't get me and George doing this, but you know, there's brothers. But even this one, this project forced me to actually think of, you know, for the first time in years, I looked at the family photo. I didn't realize we hadn't had a full family photo for like 40 years. So I looked at this photograph and I thought, let's recreate it, and we did, which is kind of funny because if you look at this photograph, look at my little brother's, George's finger. Right, what was he doing, right? And you'll notice some growth here, right? But it's really interesting that we didn't even notice the details. It was one of those things that got us off our couches to get a photograph. It's not perfect, but it was kind of fun. Open learning matters. YouTube, of course, is one of those spaces that I love to see people learn and perform. One of my favorites, I met a kid in Brampton, Ontario, 5-year-old Jordan, and he writes hip-hop songs.
I'm going to show you how to write a hip-hop song in 30 seconds, and the first thing you're going to need is a beat. Now we're going to need piano. Now we're going to need strings. Now you're going to need bass. Now you need to rap about your problem. I wanted a cookie, but Mom wanted to know. So I took it anyway, so that's how it goes. Now deal with it. Just deal with it. Got brownie for a week, candy cake. Now I got street cred, more than Drake. Now deal with it. Just deal with it.
That's right, he does. Okay, so it's incredible watching my own kids learn from the internet. This is a drum doctor, just the drum professor online who teaches people songs. And I've been trying to play drums much better than before. I bought a drum set for my daughter last Christmas. 2 days later, she was able to do at least this, which is a song I've been trying to learn for a long time. And I was kind of amazed. It's not perfect, but 2 days in, not too bad. Now I'm trying to get her regular lessons. She's kind of at a particular place. But that sort of thing just kind of amazes me. Remix and media matter in a big way as well. There's so much content out there that we can do different things with it, and we can be inspired by different things. A lot of my students do this type of work where, well, they basically, when they do summaries of learning or they do literature reduxes, what they'll do is actually take a particular genre or a movie or whatever else and then try to actually summarize it in 1 minute. We do this quite often. This is one from a different class, but one of my favorites. This is Forrest Gump in 1 minute.
I'm going to tell you the story of my life, because I'm simple. When I was young, I had to wear special shoes, and I met a girl called Jenny, and through some miracle, I didn't need my special shoes no more. I ran so well, I played football. I got to meet the President of the United States. Then Jenny came back, but she left again. Then I went to Vietnam, and I met Lieutenant Dan. Unfortunately, my bestest good friend, Bubba, died. I promised him that I'd be the captain of a shrimp boat, and I got good at ping pong, and I went to China. Then I was a shrimp boat captain with Lieutenant Dan, and then I had to go back home because my mama died. Then Jenny came back, but she left again. Then I went for a long run, and people followed me. Then Jenny told me that I was a daddy, so we got married. Then Jenny died. Then little Forrest went off for his first day of school. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get.
So pretty good. So I mean, pretty good. It's not like deep or anything, but what do you expect for 60, for 60 seconds? You've probably seen other ones like this. We also do reduxes where you shift the genre. This one's the Mary Poppins one. The Shining one's really good. And if you look at it, you'll see tons from my students. And basically, this is Mary Poppins as it would be a horror film.
Stay
That's one of the key ways I teach my media classes is they have to make me feel a particular way. So if they're creating a PSA, if they're creating a genre remix like that, I have to feel a particular way. They have to make us feel a different way. And I don't tell them how, they have to learn how, and by doing this is one of the ways that they construct the ability to do that. I want to also put in a plug for the access. Access matters. And sometimes at conferences like that, I think we're privileged to be at a conference like this, to have the funds and to be available to do this. I noticed this tweet today from Mahabali, who's an Egyptian scholar, says, "It is reasonable that the registration of a conference to the US or the UK, so you're not targeting any specific conference, translates to the monthly salary of professor level faculty at a public university in Egypt. Every conference that cares about equity should be developing country, have a developing country rate. They still got to pay flights." But it's really interesting to see that people want to have access to these things. So something for all conference organizers in every place to start thinking about is how can we be more inclusive. One of the things reasons I'm showing you this today as well, that there is something that has been going on for a while, which is great. Something called virtually connecting. So many people who can't afford to come to conferences will virtually connect with like speakers or other people, not streaming, not actually watching the streaming keynotes or whatever else, but actually getting together, doing Skype calls and that sort of thing. And if you ever get a chance to be at a conference and to connect with people who might want to be in the same room that you're at, you can actually take a look at that. So I think access really makes a big difference. Networks still matter, and I think this is the next thing. So openness was the first thing, networks still matter, and those are the two things that have been really important for my career and the way I look at things. Network learning matters in particular. Back in my dissertation, I put together this sort of PLN diagram, the idea that there's 21st century learning networks that as teachers, rather than having traditional networks, we're connected by all these tools, but ultimately what's the most important is that we're connected to people through those tools. They're just conduits. Tools come and go, but ultimately those connections we make have to be deep or they're just going to evaporate. One of the other things that a principle for the classes that we teach and for our program is we want to make sure that students actually have access to private and open and public experiences. So what does it mean in your schools, for instance? Do schools have adequate access to actually performing in a network public? Do they get to try different tools, or is everything stuck within the LMS? Are they actually getting practical skills, or are you just letting them go? We know by the age of 9, kids are already uploading photos to the internet of themselves. That's the average age in the US. I don't know about, of course, here in your respective cultures. But we have to really help kids understand. And so one of the things that we're trying to do really well is make sure that kids have practice in this space. The Learning Project is one of the things that I'm most proud of. I get it a lot from when we see people sharing their learning online. Sometimes you see the final product, right? This is how kids see learning from teachers, because we all learn, we're all competent. Why would they watch us and look at us? They're scared to learn sometimes because they haven't seen how hard it was to get to the point that we're competent in what we're doing. So this is an example of a guy who actually shared all the sort of the missteps in his journey to learn how to do the skateboard. And it goes on for like 2 minutes. I could kill 2 minutes right here if I want to, right? Like literally, right? So from this sort of thing, and it goes on and on and on, right? Okay, from this sort of thing, I think what's really important is to look at whether it's rigor, endurance, or whatever it might be, but to get into, and I'm a big fan of making learning visible. So my students, for instance, we do something called the Learning Project, where every student has to take on, or is asked to take on, some sort of learning that they've never been able to have a place, never had given the institutional or curriculum space to learn. So something they've always wanted to learn, but they never had the time and effort, and they're actually going to get credit for this. So kids will learn, well, my kids, I should keep on saying kids, but they're undergrads and sometimes high school students when I'm doing consulting with this. But also in this particular case, he's actually learning Japanese, which I actually had to get a Japanese teacher to authenticate what he was doing because I didn't know what he was saying. But this is probably one of my favorite. This is a kid who had never painted before, and he decides he wants to learn how to paint. And of course, lucky there's Bob Ross out there,
you could join
which is amazing.
Sort of
yeah, Bob's amazing. So what this kid, again, never painted before, decides he wants to learn how to paint, does a number of Bob Ross tutorials, and he creates a screencast of how he's actually doing it. not bad, right? So I'm an art teacher, right? So it's kind of amazing when you can actually look at the work. I'm not necessarily an art teacher. I've never taught art, but it's interesting that you can connect people to different resources. Our friend Dean Sharesky took this on as well. He also does the learning project with his students, and he decided at one point that I'm going to do this as well along with my students. If they're going to do this, I'm going to also do it. So Dean started putting videos on YouTube, and they weren't that good. I mean, they were basically, you barely hit a C chord or whatever else. And one person on Twitter noticed, Brant Schneider from Connecticut, I believe, noticed that he was struggling, so he said, let me see if I can get my students to connect with your students, well, to connect with you. And so these students, who were music students, senior music students, became Dean's teachers. So like just Austin here would basically create a tutorial and say, hey, Dean, I noticed that you can't keep a beat. So I'm going to, here's some steps on how to keep a beat, which is kind of amazing when you actually think about this. But of course, the old saying to learn is to teach twice, or to teach is to learn twice. That's the one. That idea I think was really interesting to see the students actually take some agency in terms of actually teaching. Then there's the general kindness of networks, and I've really, it's been very important to me, and I've benefited in so many different ways from the kindness of networks. I remember one of the first times I put out a Google Doc, one of my students said, I don't know what to write about, because all my students have to blog, and I said, well, why don't we just create a Google Doc and ask the network what to write about? And this is in the early days of Twitter when it still worked, I guess. Where you could put this out, and this document exploded. It became like 20 pages long of suggestions for my student what she could write about in terms of an ed tech class. When I ran my, when I actually applied for tenure, I put my tenure application on a web in a WordPress document. People from around the world would basically suggest things I could actually change, so whether it's a typo or maybe you missed a presentation. A guy by the name of John Becker, who's a professor at Virginia Commonwealth University, said to me, actually didn't say to me, he created a Google Doc, and basically, and the question was, what I've learned from Dr. Alec Couros, what have you learned with him, and how have you shared what you've learned? So in support of my tenure app, he basically created a document, wrote a nice letter to my dean, and I got tenure, so I was quite happy with that. When I turned 40, probably the most kind thing that I've ever received, also from that Dean Sharesky that you mentioned before, and this is a Ewan's in here too. This is one of the nicest things I've ever seen. This is about 7 years ago, and I woke up that morning with a direct message, and Dean just said, "This is for you." And so basically what people did, create a Google Doc and sang me happy birthday.
Thank you for being a friend.
It's like the greatest lip dub ever.
Back again. Your heart is true, you're a pal and a confidant.
So you get to see a number of people. We've got people from around the world all sharing it. And I was kind of amazed by this. Is that Ewan? Yeah, there you go. So Ewan's there. Thanks for that. I had to feature you. Angela Mayers, if some of you know her, is in there, and she's got pictures on her wall of me, which it's like a totally creepy little piece, but and there's George doing a little dance, and it was just really cool. People from all aspects of my life. And that's the sort of thing I loved at that particular time, and it still happens. Cogdog, as some of you may have seen at conferences, he's a fantastic person. What he did was this North American tour where he actually kind of couch sat on people he met on the network, which is just as good enough, just as amazing as it is. But at sometime during that trip, his mother had passed away. He says, travel plans are scratched, just got a call. My mom passed away one day after anniversary of my dad's death. What he really wanted to remember, when he shared a blog post about her, he called her the cookie lady because basically she loved baking cookies, and that's how he often remembered her. So, and he had really nice photographs of her cooking or baking cookies. And so cookie love became a hashtag all of a sudden. And I remember I was in Shanghai at, I think, a Learning 2 conference at the time. And there were people that were her friends who were baking cookies. There's Jabiz, if some of you know him, and Darren Kurapatwa also sharing cookies. And cookie love was right across the world. And it was really kind of amazing to see people going door to door and sharing cookies in the honor of Cogdog's mother, who no one knew, but it didn't matter. It was just the kindness and love that people could share and to be inspired like that. And I think it was kind of amazing. Of course, when I ran a MOOC, it sounds like ran amok, but when I ran a MOOC back in 2000, 2013, I just put out a tweet. 12,000 people showed up for my MOOC, which is kind of amazing. But what's more amazing is that it was 4 years after it. Now we're coming up on the 5th anniversary. It was supposed to be a 10-week course, and people never left. There's still people involved in it, and I know they want to have another 5th anniversary. Not all 12,000 by any means, but I was amazed. They wanted to do a 4th anniversary piece, and all of a sudden, we were in Zoom, and I noticed that my president was there, and I thought, oh, am I getting fired? What's going on? Like, this is the worst day ever. But no, she announced that the MOOC community actually put together a bursary, a $20,000 bursary. They fundraised, and they were basically putting in the honor of my dad's name to support a new Canadian to take an education degree, which was just amazing to me. Like, that's amazing. So again, the kindness just continues on, and there's my dad's bursary, which is, of course, a funded bursary, which is amazing. Compassion survives, and I think we have to remember that ultimately, but it has to start with citizenship. What we've been doing in schools, unfortunately in some ways, is we teach digital citizenship like it's some form of citizenship, but it's actually, if we look at most of the frameworks for digital citizenship, all the citizenship is drained out of it. It's mostly just being cyber safe. And we have to be very thoughtful about that, and especially when it gets to things like activism, we have to be cautious about that, how we do it, and we have to be more effective at it. Now, we get scared, and I understand, even this old adage, actions speak louder than like buttons, which I think there is certainly the tendency to fall into when you get into web activism, the idea that you're just doing slacktivism or nothing at all, or maybe even making things worse. I like, this is the Ralph Wiggum version, basically. I'm helping by changing your Facebook profile. Sometimes you're not helping by doing that, but sometimes you're raising awareness. There's actually, but at the same time, the good criticism for even face-to-face activism is that sometimes it's not really what we expect it to be. One of the best criticisms of sort of the drop-in sort of charity or the type of activism that you often see is this Barbie savior. It's the White Savior Barbie Instagram account, which is really cutting critique in ways, and it's kind of a funny one to look at, but it is actually really great to see that these drop-ins don't work. They don't effectively change anything. At the same time, there's lots of good examples of people where there's missteps online and things get better. So for instance, there is this, one of my favorite is, there's a bus monitor who was incredibly bullied online. Now this is just a charity, but I thought it was kind of amazing. She was bullied. Someone said, let's raise her $5,000, and you see stories like this all the time now, and they ended up raising like $700,000 instead. She was able to retire. She just wanted a vacation. Someone arranged it for her. She was able to do that, and I think it was amazing. This is just one of those tiny little stories. One kid basically put out a sign on his front lawn to say, hey, come watch me play piano. No one came. He was kind of all disappointed. He was like a young kid. And then all of a sudden, what happened after that is someone put it on Facebook, got people to come. So all of a sudden, people from all over the community started coming. They were in the rain with raincoats and umbrellas, had signs and so on. It's those really little moments that even these random acts of kindness are really a kind of a good thing and important, I believe. When a student finds a problem and it's worth fixing and she's able to fix it, that's one of my favorite as well. This was a teen who just noticed that people didn't have lunch partners, and she was able to create a very simple app that's being used at schools around the world that allow you to basically sit with someone or find someone to sit with. One of my personal favorites, and I see a lot on Reddit. I'm a big fan of Reddit. Reddit can be a horrible place, but it can also be a great place. One time late at night, I saw this, and it was a guy who had recently lost his son to cancer. And he just basically said, and I'd never do this if I had horrible circumstances, really risky. He says, this is my son Dexter. He picked up he picked these flowers, last spring for my wife. Dex passed away 11/29/2012, shortly after his 3rd birthday. Complications from leukemia. Can anyone clean this iPhone pickup and make it Uber, a minimalist rendition of it? So basically that's the photo, which I think needs no fixing. Sad enough as it was. Some people actually did a little bit of photoshopping, make it a bit nicer. Some people made it black and white. Some people started drawing it, which I think was really great. Other versions of it came out all from this one thread. People started looking at it, And that was the sort of the uber minimalist rendition started to come out. And even this particular one was from the other side. It was the only one from the other side, which was sort of the metaphor for being on the other side, which was really kind of amazing. And just watching these people basically tear up and talk about how impactful this was on them was just kind of something. And I'm like tearing up in my room. My wife walks in and she's like, "Are you crying on the internet again?" And it's just like, and I was. I mean, it's just, I love seeing these moments, and I think these still happen. It doesn't matter if we're seeing such negativity. We have to hold on to these moments. We have to get them back. We have to make them keep on happening. And I think that's incredibly important. And that's why, again, going back to the idea of digital citizenship, not what we often want it to be. We have to think much more broadly about citizenship. We need to reclaim the citizen from digital citizenship again. One of the places you can look for that is Joel Westheimer's work. He's from the University of Ottawa. He talks about the question of what kind of citizen, and he's classified different types of citizens. First of all, there's the personally responsible citizen, which is the one that sort of cuts the grass and mows the lawn and makes sure everything is okay. You know, conscious of personal security, non-offensive, non-harassing communication, kind of just gets along. Then there's the participatory citizen who develops and/or shares online or petitions online or whatnot, actively shares and/or creates information for the social good. I mean, this is some aspects of it, and there's lots of different parts. But when you get really into the one that I think are most important, but not for everyone, and I totally understand that, is when you get to the justice-oriented system, one that seeks to understand root causes of issues, campaigns to work towards social change and equity, willingness to call out injustices. And that's where I think this really needs to move, and I think we need to move towards this. When we look at hashtags, and often we think hashtags, you know, they're just hashtags, or they're just the way you feel, or they're sarcastic. I mean, just think to the Me Too movement last little while, or the Why I Stayed movement, or Time's Up, and so on. They're very controversial, but they're powerful. They're making people think and talk differently than they ever have before. We have to continue to have this conversation. So in conclusion, and I'm just running out of time, we'll just have enough time. I saw this today from Ross Parker, which I'm not sure is in the room, and I was happy to hear this. Because most of my sessions at this conference have been like horrible, these are terrible things, fake news is horrible, and I'm glad I at least get to finish off on a positive note. And I do, really the internet in some ways has lost its shine, but for the most part, it's really important, and it's okay to look at it in a utopian way in some ways. And I think about my dad years ago, and just that connection that we made. Like Skype was just a simple technology, or FaceTime in this particular case, but what I remember from Clay Shirky, he says, we systematically underestimate the value of access to information, which was the early web, right? It was all about a place to look up stuff. Ultimately, what we see now is we underestimate the value of access to each other, and that is the incredible gift that we have in the web, whether it's an app or whether it's internet or whatnot. Some of the other things I'm hopefully outlining as well that are important. One quick video, I think some of you may have seen this, but it's still my favorite one on the web. And this is basically where it fits into pedagogy, the idea that this group of Brazilian students looking to learn English decided to connect with the seniors' home. We can do this in our pedagogy, these acts of kindness all the time.
We created a tool that connects our students with seniors in the USA living in retirement homes.
Hello, hello.
Melissa.
Hi, Dick.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you? It's the first time that I'm talking with someone from another country.
I'm very excited to be doing this.
I look like I'm only 25, but I'm 88.
Do you have sisters and brothers?
No, I'm one child.
Only one? Oh, you poor fella.
I'm live with my old brother. He has 23 years.
Do you know, instead of saying he has 23 years, you could say he is 23 years old.
I tried to go to Lollapalooza that we have next week, I think, in Brazil, but my mom didn't let me.
You got a good mom.
Good morning, dear Julia. Good morning to you.
This is your dad?
That's me and my wife when we were young.
Oh, you were good looking when you were young. And you're still good looking.
My first destiny is United States, of course, because I wanted to put better my English.
Well, you do very well, I must say.
Are you planning someday to go to Brazil?
Oh, I would like to.
You can stay in my house if you want.
If you could just dream and have whatever you want, what do you think you would like to be doing?
I see myself in big family, you know, with a beautiful wife, you know. I want to thank you for this change of experience, you know. You are incredible.
Obrigado.
You are my new granddaughter.
And I love you.
I love you too.
And if you were here, I would give you a big hug.
Oh yeah, let's hug. Oh.
Bye.
Bye.
So I love this project, the more than better students, better people. And I think that's a goal that all of us have in some way. And so I'll just offer this, technology and pedagogy. We've got the techno-pedagogy down. Most of you probably have it down, but let's make sure that we're intentional about thinking about the humanity and how we embed that in everything we do. So thank you so much, and that's me if you need to get in contact with me. Thanks so much for listening.